Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
All right, moms, you're going to definitely want to put on your mama ears because I brought us a professional today, somebody who's really going to talk us through how to do this momming thing at, let's say, an expanded view, a level that maybe we can take a look and really understand how to, yes, actually take care of ourselves and our kids at the same time, that thing that feels like an impossible dream sometimes. Dr. Morgan Cutlip joins me today. She is a psychotherapist. Morgan, you're going to have all the answers. Am I right?
Every single one. Yes.
Good. We need you here. So Dr. Morgan, I want you to tell the listener where you live, what your life is like, how you ended up in psychotherapy, cats, dogs, whatever you got. Fill us in.
Man, we could just spend the whole time talking about this stuff and stories. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here and just to speak to your listeners. And so I'm really humbled. All right. I live in Southern California. I am from Ohio. I feel like I need to say that because I'm very proud of growing up in Ohio. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. His name is Chad. And we did not date the entire time. So I say that because I've been in the field of relationships for so long that if I say I'm married my high school sweetheart, people instantly take away all credibility because they're like, you have no street cred because you didn't date. But we went through a very, many years of not even speaking, but we have been married. It's going to be 15 years in 2 weeks. Yeah. And it's been fun and it's interesting and all the things. And 2 children, Effie, who's 10, and Roy, who's 7. And they're family names. They're not elderly people. And and what else? So why am I in this profession? Ever since I can remember, I wanted to go into psychology. My dad has his doctorate in psychology. He went back to school when I was little, and I would sometimes go to classes with him. And then he started developing educational courses about relationships before everybody and their cousin had a course on relationships. Yeah. And I started traveling around with him. So middle school, high school, I was going to marriage conferences and running the booth and working alongside him. And sort of was just I feel like I just grew up in the field. I was listening to Gary Chapman and, I'm drawing a blank, but Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I've heard him speak a number of times, all the Gottman, those big names. I grew up kind of listening to them speak at this conference. And, I knew that I wanted to be able to stand on my own right. So I pursued my, education to be credentialed myself. And so master's and doctorate in psychology. And I've worked with my dad for around 15 years. We're doing a little bit of our own thing now, but we still cross paths. But I knew, probably in my freshman or sophomore year in college that I wanted to do something to serve women. I just didn't know what it looked like. Mm-hmm. Fast forward many, many years, I became a mom and was like, this is insane. I thought I would be really good at this. I thought somehow all my degrees and my years
would somehow be effective.
It should, right? Yeah. But it doesn't. And that loss of freedom I experienced right off the bat just smacked me upside the head. I was not anticipating it. The way, I'll never forget the moment my husband came home with a haircut and I was like, must be nice. Yeah. You get to do that. And just was so overwhelmed and felt lost in it. And I won't keep going, but there were circumstances of my life that further complicated it with my husband's work. And I just knew. I knew someday I'm going to come out of this haze. Someday I'm going to feel a little bit better. And I'm going to help moms navigate this time differently and feeling more equipped. So that's my journey into the motherhood space.
I can feel collectively, I can just feel a listenership taking a deep inhale and exhale going, if the psychotherapist thinks parenting is hard, that momming is hard, then I'm okay to feel this way. You know, the permission to just recognize that it is so different and still, and I don't like making things super gendered or whatever, but it's still different to be a mom than to be a dad. Even if you have a very engaged dad, even if you have a dad who knows how to iron, it's still a different experience. My moment, Morgan, you know, your husband comes home with the haircut and you're like, wow, I mean, maybe you didn't say it quite the way I would say it. That had a lot of snark in it. Forgive me. Mine was getting my teeth cleaned and feeling like I was having a spa day, like really feeling like I was doing something pretty luxurious. And I'm sure that my dental hygienist was like, wow, girlfriend, like you probably should talk to somebody. Maybe you should call Dr. Morgan Cutlip and talk to her about this because this is kind of sad. So it really is a relief, I think, that permission to hear from someone who's had the training, who grew up in it, who saw all the things, say, wow, even with all of that, it was still a surprise what it actually takes. And to me, Morgan, it's no wonder that many times one of the primary feelings, if we can even sort through our feelings to understand what we're feeling, the one we typically can pull up out of the bag is say, I am burned out. Like that's what I know. I don't even know if I can say overwhelmed. I don't know if I can say a little bit disappointed, but also kind of happy, but also a little bit giggly, but at the same time kind of sad. Like I think the primary word that I would pull out of that bag would be burnout. So how do you define it? Because for me, it feels like a big catch-all term, and yet it sort of feels like we all know what we're talking about.
Totally.
How do you look at burnout?
You said so many things that I'm wanting to respond to, and so I will answer your question. I will say, maybe we'll circle back, but permission is a really important piece to me. I think that, you know, in motherhood, we're regularly holding these dualities of like, it's hard and it's beautiful, it's magical and it's miserable. And it's like all these. And so I think permission to feel both of them at the same time is really important for us moms, because when we are holding both of those conflicting realities in our head at the same time, we're like, I shouldn't feel one or the other. I shouldn't feel one of these. I shouldn't feel bad about this. It should be this. It should be that. And so that takes up a lot of energy, which leads to burnout. It's one of the paths to burnout. There's many paths to get there. So I'm glad that you said that. I also started my book talking about the reasons why motherhood feels hard, because I think we need definition around that. So, but to your question, how do I define burnout? I think the first one, there's three key defining features of burnout. And the first is exactly what you said. It's like, you just feel it. It's that physical and emotional exhaustion, which is just what we'll say, like, I'm just so burnt out. It's that visceral knowing type of experience. The second is a disconnecting or numbing out. And I think that, you know, we're parenting in this digital age. I think that it's become really common to just numb out on our phones when we're wanting to escape, or shopping is a big one, right? Like, I'm just going to get myself something. I'm going to zone out. I'm going to scroll these stores. So this escapism piece is another sign of burnout. And then the third is this emotional or cognitive dysregulation. And so if you're more irritable, if you feel like you don't have the bandwidth to like tolerate your own frustration, that is another symptom of being burnt out. And then the cognitive piece is like, you can't catch your thoughts. And a lot of us will say, oh, it's mom brain. I'm like, probably it's a few things. Like the mental load is taking up a lot of space in there, but also it's likely that you're burnt out and your cognitive capacities are totally tapped out. So like you lose creative energy, which is a really hard one and can be painful, especially if you are in a creative space. You forget things a lot. You misplacing stuff. Those are the three main signs of burnout, but they show up in really practical ways that we can often shrug off as normal parts of motherhood.
Right. And in some way we're sort of trained as part of motherhood, and it's part of what you're supposed to carry and it's part of what you're supposed to do. Let's talk about the mental load, because this is a phraseology that we're seeing really emerge more and more today. Yeah. And when I first encountered the term, I thought, To me, if you could see my desktop right now, Morgan, you would be laughing and then probably asking me to come in a couple times next week. But like there are tabs open just for miles. I just have tabs open all the time. And that is how my brain has operated for a very long time. And I will tell you, part of that is just part of how I'm wired. I'm like a big old satellite dish, just always picking up inputs all the time. But you add motherhood to that. And even as I'm standing here talking to you, I'm present. I'm so excited for this conversation. And in the back of my head, I already have my Instacart list being, like it's going.
You're populating it.
It's populating. I can just see it, like, and that's in the back of my head. And then I also am remembering that I need to trade out some laundry. And then I'm also remembering that I have that client who was needing XYZ. And I told them that I would do that, which means I need to call them in about however much time. And that's not even really going into the deep dive of all of the stuff that I'm remembering that needs to be done for my family, for my puppy dog, for my vehicle. So when we talk about mental load, I know that there is a level at which we're not trying to make it exclusive. All human beings have this place where they can be carrying a lot of open tabs. But there does seem to be something unique in our culture right now for women in the seasons of life that you and I are in, that the listener is in, that I feel like our mental desktops are just wild all the time. Everything
it's
that's
bananas.
On. What are you seeing in your practice? And is this different than previous generations, or is this just a different type of way that we identify what's happening that just sounds a little more modern? What are we doing there?
I mean, I don't know exactly if it's different than previous generations. I think there are some differences in how we parent and how we mother specifically that I think adds to our load. So I can speak to that too. But should we define it? Do people know what it is?
I think that's let's start there.
Yeah, let's define it. So the mental load is you described it so nicely with practical examples, but it's like the running to-do list that we carry around in our minds. And it has a few key features. One is that the majority of it's invisible. And so this becomes a really big challenge when talking to our partners about it, because they're like, just make a list, you're like, no, you don't understand. Like there's so many things that, I can't even recall to tell you that just magically happen around the house. The second thing is that they're often repetitive. It's like, I made dinner last night. You mean I got to do it again tonight? Yeah. And the laundry keeps laundrying. And like, the repetition of it can become really just draining. And then the third is that it takes up cognitive real estate. So it just takes up space, which means other things get crowded out. We only have so much capacity to hold stuff in our mind. And so there's lots of things that get crowded out, like being in a happy mood, potentially, or being in the mood to have sex with your partner. Like that takes mental energy to get in these spaces. And so those are the main features of the mental load, I think. So if I can speak to like previous generations versus today, we are parenting in a time of like, we're calling it cycle breaking. And I don't know if you've seen that kind of like trending in your conversation. We're breaking cycles. We're parenting with a lot of intention and care. And it's a really, really wonderful thing. Also, too much of a good thing can become bad. And I think that with this intention and this intensity, we are piling on more responsibility and parenting with like a lot of hypervigilance. And so things like, I really need to think about how I want to phrase X, Y, or Z when my kid's having a meltdown. Or I really need to create a stimulating educational environment for my kid, whatever, all of the time. Or what about the GMOs in my food and the chemical? Like there's just a lot more awareness and intention in how we're parenting that I believe ends up adding a lot more to our mental load, because part of the mental load is the emotional well-being of people you're in relationship with, like this caretaking piece. And so I think this is new to our generation. I remember talking to my mom and I was like, did you worry about these things? I definitely know she was stressed out about the amount of responsibilities around the home and stuff, and she'd get irritated. But in terms of like the child rearing and parenting piece, she's like, I just called my friend and just did exactly what they did. There wasn't this sorting through the experts' opinions and information and trying to make sense of it all and find the right way to do it so you didn't traumatize your kids. Right. That I think exists now that's really, really heavy. Right.
I think about my mom had one book, Morgan, one book. And it was Dr. Benjamin Spock. And
Spock, of course it was Spock.
He was the guy, and that was
Yeah.
it. And by the time I had my first baby, there was, a wall of books. And now, by the time I had my last babies, 16 years later, it was libraries and libraries. And then, I went and wrote another one. But I still am just fascinated with the wealth of information, which is lovely. But all that competing information, for every book you find saying doing this way, there's somebody else who's like, absolutely don't do it that way. That hypervigilance piece is so interesting. We also have a generation of parents who were some of the first ones to be raised in the CNN generation, with access to news all the time, with that level to which we can become so overwhelmed by all the legitimately scary things in the world. And yet our news cycle is immediate. It's from 27 different perspectives. It's alerts that come up on your phone.
My gosh.
If you're just trying to scroll Instagram and get an idea for, making your living room look cute, you probably are also getting information and content that does send your nervous system into a bit of a spiral. How do we mitigate some of that? Because there are times, of course, Morgan, that I'm like, okay, I got to take a break. I'm going to avoid this input. I'm going to take a pause from that. And yet it still is showing up everywhere. Even if you're at the gas station pumping gas, there's probably some news station that's on the little individualized TV at your gas pump. Like, how do we do a better job of regulating in a hypervigilant space as moms, in a place where we already know that the mental load is heavy? Now, here's one more thing we're asking ourselves to do. But how do we do it? How do we get to a place we can regulate a little bit better?
Well, I think so. There's all types of regulation. There's like quick tips and things like that for regulation, like that a lot of occupational therapists will talk about that become really helpful, like try to push a wall over, or firm pressure and deep pressure. And there's
box breathing,
and it all works. It all helps. So those are things that we can do. I feel like that's not as much my wheelhouse. So like in my book, I do a section where I do talk about some of that stuff. But I believe that the way that there's lots of ways of answering the question. The other is, so if we get really specific about content, because I think content is something that it's one aspect that can feed this hypervigilance in parenting. I mean, as you were talking, I've recalled like all these really scary posts I've seen about random ways kids have died, and it's like, it's traumatizing sometimes. Absolutely. Consuming this content where you're like, geez, now I got to worry about this. So I think, part of it is we have to use some discernment in the way that we consume our content. We can't control if we're pumping gas and the news comes on, but we certainly can control if we go numb out on our phones and then feel crappy when we're done.
Right.
And so I think that part of my bigger message to moms is that we are like the master managers of everyone else, all of the people and all of the things in our life, but we don't necessarily turn those skill sets toward ourselves. And so we have to get good at tuning into ourselves. What do we need? How are we doing? How can we turn the dials in this moment, given the time and the space that we have? And part of using discernment is tuning into ourselves and saying, what kind of headspace am I in right now? Do I really need more advice about how to handle this particular issue with my kid? Do I really need to consume more content about our government and what's going on in the world? So, and checking in and really making sure you're in a space to consume it. And if you're not, then don't. Right. And if you put your phone down and you feel like crap, then it's time to make some adjustments in how you boundary yourself and protect yourself.
I love in your new book, Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself, that you talk about this process of checking in, because I have to tell you, Morgan, one of my degrees is in psych. I have not gone as far as you did, but this is a skill set that I should have had just right at my ready when I became a mom. And I forgot about it for 23 years. Just, how to actually check in and say and observe myself. Sometimes we're so in the mix of doing the things and reacting to our kids and responding to our kids and responding to the needs that we haven't even asked ourselves, what am I actually feeling in this moment? How am I physically feeling? I am shocked at the number of times that I would sit in an incredibly uncomfortable position for an hour holding a toddler, not even thinking to move, because I just wasn't checking in with myself at all. So describe for the listener, when you say checking in, what are some easy questions we can ask ourselves, both from a spiritual place, an emotional place, and the physical place? The physical one was one of the tough ones for me to get used to. I got so accustomed to being physically uncomfortable or tight all the time. How do we take us a little bit deeper dive on this checking in process?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think about all of the times I've been holding my pee as a mom. I don't know if you did this. It's like my mom will still do it. I'm like, you have no reason. But it's like just one more thing. I can get one more thing done before I go to the bathroom. I don't want to waste that minute.
Some kind of weird relay race. I don't know.
It is. So the check, I think that, so I think a lot of women might identify, be like, oh yeah, I'll check in with myself and I can do that. But I think that part of what's lacking is like an actual framework or plan for what does that look like? Right. What are you checking in on? And then once you do it, I mean, moms might check in with themselves and be like, I feel like crap. Yeah. So that's what I know.
There.
Yeah. What do you want me to do about it? Yeah. And so, so part of what I outline in my book is what does a self check-in look like? What are the steps? What are you checking in on? I give a model of relationships because we have a relationship with ourselves. We don't think of it that way, but we do. So it's a model of relationships. You go through, there's 5 areas. You go through the 5 areas. And you can do a self check-in in the amount of time it takes to like make a PB&J. It's really easy. You can do it in your head. And then I give targeted like things you can actually do. So if you make an assessment of yourself and you're like, okay, this is what's feeling kind of low or vulnerable, what can I do about it? And so just really being a bit more targeted in that stuff is helpful. So for example, if we talk about the physical, a question you can ask is, how is my body speaking to me? And am I listening? I actually just shared, I did an exclusive interview with a functional medicine coach. That is a freebie when you pre-order. Right. Because I wanted to go deeper in this because 80% of people diagnosed with autoimmunes are women. Yeah. And we are so good at ignoring the physical signs that our body needs a little bit of help. Right. And so it's not just, self-care, take a walk, get your nails done. It's how's my body speaking to me and how can I respond in meaningful ways and care for it? If your child came to you every single day complaining that their stomach hurt, would you just say, just hold on a couple years, I'll get to you later? Yeah. We would respond. And part of the messaging in my book is we have to mother ourselves like we mother our kids. And we wouldn't put our kids off. So why are we doing that to ourselves? Right. And so that's one of the questions that you can ask to really to do during your check-in. Right, and to do something about it. You use a phrase in your new book that I've used a variation of it for a long time, which is this idea of momming yourself. I would say mama yourself. Yeah. And the thing that I love in you bringing that up is there are things, particularly for today's parents, who are being so intentional and really checking in with their kids and really trying to tune into what their kids' emotions are and how their kids are doing. Mm-hmm. And yet you're right, we don't do that for ourselves, even though I think today's parents are modeling it in a really beautiful way to their kids. It's not reciprocal to ourselves. And so how critical it is to take that moment to mama when we can and for, to really check in and make sure that we're doing all right. Now, one of the things that you talk about is this idea of you can love your kids. It doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. And I got to tell you, I am watching, because it's back to school season as we're recording this. Oh, yeah. And so I'm seeing moms from a variety of times and seasons in their lives, everything from that first baby going to the first day of preschool, to the last baby starting kindergarten, to the first kid leaving for college. And you know what, Morgan? It all looks the same on the faces of a lot of these women. I mean, just that, oh, wow, things are changing. Time is flying. I'm seeing everywhere right now, the meme that says time is a thief and it's true. Yeah. And I get tickled because it is applied to the bottom of every Instagram post, regardless of the age of the kid, like whatever the season is, time is a thief. So when we talk about this notion of not losing ourselves, we know that motherhood is this wildly, and I'm going to use a word that's kind of loaded, and I don't mean it in a negative sense. It's a wildly sacrificial relationship. It has to be. You have to be willing to sacrifice the sleep, the schedule, and what your belly button used to look like, because you're probably going to have a different one by the time you have that baby. At least mine is a wildly different character than it was 8 kids ago. So what do we mean about trying to keep ourselves? What does that mean? Because now we've added a persona. I'm not going to go back and be the person I was prior to not being a mom.
But who am I now, and how do I retain that? How do I figure that out?
Yeah, this is like the crux of it. And
Right.
because I spend more time than I like on social media, I see a lot of extremes. So you got to take care of you first, like this whole messaging, which I don't really I'm very much a live in the gray type of person. And so I don't think that's the answer. And I don't think the answer is to self-sacrifice so much in our relationships with our kids that we become bitter and resentful. I know, like, as much as we hate to admit it, we've all had a moment, or many, where we are giving so much of us that we're mad at our kids for it.
Yeah.
And that's not a good place to be. And so when I was thinking about my book and even thinking about the title, I really wanted to capture what I think is at the heart of what I'll say most, but almost all of us moms want, which is we want to be really good moms. Like, we really want to. It is an honor to be a mom and to show up for these kids and to give for these children and to raise them. We want to be good moms, but we don't want to feel so crappy in it.
Right.
We want to feel better in motherhood. And I do think that there is a way, and I don't think the way is really an either extreme, but rather it's this. So like I talk about in the book, the myth of baloney, or I'm sorry, the myth of baloney, the myth of balance, that balance is baloney, and that finding some perfect place where we everything is in this cruising altitude and we remain there forever isn't practical because life throws this turbulence at us. And so, it's natural that we're going to be pulled to lose ourselves and our kids and to sacrifice everything. But we can't remain there because then we become bitter and resentful and burnt out. And then that backfires in our relationships with our kids. And so when we do regularly tune in, we could say, okay, I've been given a whole lot. I have a minute. I'm going to recalibrate a little bit here. And now I'm going to bring myself up to a different level now and take care of me a little bit. This feels a little bit better. Oh, back into all my kids. It's back to school time. It's crazy. Oh, I need to recalibrate. It's this getting good at balancing. It's a practice. It's not a permanent state. And so I think that's what we need to know about being lost in motherhood, is that it's normal. It's going to happen.
Right.
It's required sometimes. But how do we get out of it? And there is a way, I think, to really, show up well in both of these relationships and feel good about it.
What would be the value in thinking right now, when you're in the thick of it with your elementary kids going back to school and you're trying to get all the coordinated backpacks, or you've got high schoolers who you're having to navigate the disastrous rooms and the curfews and all that kind of stuff? How can we begin to think about the place, and not in a longing or anything like that, or in a dreading, but when we talk about the launch, we typically talk about what we hope our kids will be equipped with, who they will be when they launch into the world. We don't talk about who we're going to be after the launch. Like, we don't take any time to do that. What are some things we can be thinking about the women we want to be on that side of things, and make sure we're heading toward that destination as well? Because we can get so focused, we can lose ourselves in getting our kids equipped for the launch that we have no idea. We kind of figured out the balance when they were home, and now we've got them on the other side. And now we're still the mom who was still trying to balance everything when they were back in elementary school or high school, but they're at college. How do we do that?
Yeah, so two areas that there's lots of ways, but I'll give two areas. So one is that how you know yourself. I think that this is chapter 4 in my book. I talk about when you know yourself deeply, then you can love, you can take care of yourself and meet your needs in the ways that you need the most. And I think a lot of us, as our kids go through different seasons, when we first become a mom, when they start going to school, there's different seasons in motherhood where we'll be like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't even recognize the mom that I'm acting like right now. And so it can be really helpful periodically, or if you're like, I'm already in the launch phase, I didn't do this along the way, you can reflect on a couple areas. So one is, think about what brings you meaning. We sort of put a lot of this stuff on the back burner when we're in mom mode. So what brings you meaning in your life? The other is what is really important to you. I think they are separate, but what feels like this is an intense value for me? This is really at the core of who I am. And then the third is, when do you feel most aligned with yourself? Like, when do you feel like this is the me I imagine myself to be, and reflect on these 3 areas, and it can help you start to sketch out how you can start to become more congruent with who you imagined yourself to be. The other thing that this is my experience with most moms and women really, but moms specifically, is that we lose touch with what we need. So for the mom of young kids, what happens a lot is like she'll finally get that moment alone and she won't even know how to spend it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, by the time you kind of settle into something, everyone's back. And you're like, gosh, darn it. Yeah. I lost my time. And so I think, that's something that I think is really common because we're sort of in this mode where we have to put the needs of others before us. But then we get sort of stuck there. And so ours become really small and they kind of disappear. And then we're like, I don't even know. I'm a cactus. Like I need nothing. And so, which is not true. Yeah. And so part of it is coming back into the know with what you need. And so I'll give a quick hack for how to figure out what you need. One is, what do you complain about the most? Mm-hmm. Our complaints are windows into our deep unmet needs. And so think about what you complain about to your kids, to your partner. I don't know if I made this term up. I like to think I did, but sometimes I do a monologue where I'm like upset and I'm like, like I'm narrating my frustration. Yeah. If somebody recorded your monologue, what are you complaining about? This is a really great way to figure out what you need. And then another way is and I give an outline framework in my book. So like 5 areas to think about what you need. But another is, when is the last time you felt truly at peace and rested? And like, what were the circumstances of your life then? And how can you replicate that or get closer to it?
Right. Those are fantastic because, again, an extension, right, of that checking in with yourself, just applying that to saying, okay, so how do I get back to that core of who I am? Those things that are going to stand wherever we're at in our roles as moms, as wives, as employees, whatever. What is the thing that I can come back to that I know is still central to me? I think that's really beautiful. Well, Dr. Morgan Cutlip, I mean, what a treat to get to have somebody on who's like, listen, I live where you live, and I also have some training and some experience so that I can help. Tell the listener where they can go to find out more about your new book, Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself, and then all the places that are fun to check in, pre-orders, all that kind of stuff.
All right. So you can learn more about my book on my website. So it's drmorgancutlip.com/book. And it's links to all the retailers as well as how you can learn how to get all the free gifts that are available for just about a month longer. I don't know when this is airing, but till September 19th, and then they go away. And I have some really, really good ones that I'm excited about. Plus, I'm really excited, but you get to listen to the intro and first 2 chapters immediately, which I thought was really important for moms to be able to listen right away instead of getting a PDF or something. And so you can find all that there. And then mostly I'm on Instagram. I'm on other socials, but you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and it's just Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
Awesome. Perfect. And we'll have Rebecca put that in the show notes, because the show notes is where we link all this good stuff. Remember, listener, you want to go there. I don't want you looking for stuff on your phone while you're driving or anything like that. Take a beat. Go find it in the show notes when you get home. Be safe. Morgan, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate your time. It's just fantastic to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
And be sure and go to AllMomDoes, AllMomDoes on the socials, and AllMomDoes.com. You're going to find a great community there of other women who are navigating the same journey you are, making time for their spiritual lives, pursuing God, also their romances, their kids, their careers, all the stuff. And I love to connect with you too, Julie Lyles Carr, all the places. Do me a big favor. I would love it if you would grab a link for this episode and send it to someone who you know is in that mom frame of mind going, who am I? How do I check in with how I feel these days? Send it to her. It's going to be a blessing to her, and it's a blessing to us when you share the podcast. And I'll see you next time on the AllMomDoes Podcast.